The best lawyers aren't found in the big law firms. They're found in the stories of those who left.
Hello, listeners and viewers of the Sell Life podcast, the Self-Employed Lawyers League. I've got with me a founding member, Alex Palmer of Adari Consulting. Alex, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Jason. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And so I met Alex, not well before, but several months, probably 6 months before Courtney and I started the Self-Employed Lawyers League. So Alex is a founding member, and today we're going to get to know how Alex became a lawyer, why Alex became a lawyer, and then when she became self-employed, how that journey's commenced. So first question everyone gets, when did you decide to become a lawyer, and what made you decide to study law?
Okay, it's a bit of a strange one. I actually wanted to be a vet. I'm a massive animal lover, and I studied biology, chemistry, physics through O-level in the UK, and it really wasn't the way my brain worked. So I had to take a little bit of a think about what am I going to do. And I was always very ambitious and wanted to, have a career. My mother was a single mother, had always worked. I'd worked from the age of 12 in various organizations, from zoos to cafes to restaurants, all the normal thing. And so I was quite used to working hard and really wanted to help work for someone like the World Wildlife Fund and help in conservation and those sorts of things. But that didn't really work out in the way my brain works. So we went to Plan B, and Plan B was, okay, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll study law, and through law, I'll work towards helping animals. So that was the plan. So off I went to law school and really engaged in all sorts of different areas of law and studied all the electives I could, including animal law, but really fell in love with the human side of law, and employment law became an area that I thought that I'd like to follow. So that became a bit of a passion, and I after law school, I did a postgraduate diploma in personnel management, and my first role was with Harrods in London as an employment lawyer. I hadn't done articles at the time. It was a bit of a tricky time when we graduated from law school. And so an opportunity came up and I jumped at it.
Yeah.
So I suppose how and why I became a lawyer was I was a failed vet. but
it's a fascinating...
fail.
But you knew, I guess, to know that young, that you what you wanted to pursue. Because for me, I guess when I look back, I started studying law in my late 20s.
Yes.
And I couldn't fathom, I guess, having that clarity of, I kind of know where I want to go. And then even the clarity to go, but I know brain doesn't work in this way to do the science side of it, but I'll still pursue that same vision.
Yes.
Is that just in your upbringing? That's where that came from? Like from your parents, there's always sort of a plan in place and you set to that plan and you follow it?
Yes, I think that's right. Both my parents were very ambitious, worked all over the world, had their particular sort of areas of interest, and worked hard all their careers. So we never saw anything different. That was just what you did.
Yeah.
It was my sister and I, and we both have great careers and have worked all our lives.
Yeah. Well, and then so got into the sort of firm, because I don't know the UK well enough. I obviously know of Taylor Rose, but it was that a big top tier type firm?
So Harrods is the major department store in London. It was owned by Mohammed Al Fayed at the time, and so it was an interesting route in. It gave me the opportunity so I didn't have a practicing certificate at the time, but in the UK, you can practice in industrial tribunal and in employment law without a practicing certificate. So that was my route in a difficult climate, I suppose. And I spent 4 years there in various roles. I was in the legal department for a while, and then moved to the HR department, where I focused on employment-related matters. And then I spent some time working for Mr. Fayed as his legal PA. Really, he wanted to introduce me to lawyers that were helping him in relation to a listing on the London Stock Exchange, and there were various salacious allegations that have come to fore more recently. But anyway, that was sort of a variety of things, really, to increase my management involvement in the business and maturity, I suppose. I was pretty young at the time. I was 23 when I joined.
Yeah.
So I spent 4 really fascinating years at Harrods, and we won't talk about all of those right now. But then an opportunity came up in Melbourne for a firm called Allen's, or it was Arthur Robinson Hedowicks at the time. So I moved with my husband to Australia in 1998 and joined Allen's. And again, predominantly, they brought me over to help with, or to join the employment team. And the employment team sat in the litigation department. And that was still an area that I was very interested in. But again, as a young lawyer, you need a bit more exposure. And so then became my trajectory, I suppose, from pure employment into general commercial litigation. And as a general commercial litigator, I ended up helping a number of large corporate clients in relation to regulatory breaches and investigations. So you can start to see, how one's initial thoughts as to how your career is going to go sort of starts moving. And I took all the opportunities. I've always been a believer in don't shut any doors, take all opportunities and see what occurs.
Yeah.
So I spent 11 years at Allen's in private practice, and after 11 years was really looking for something different and a bit of a change. And that was when I began my career as an in-house commercial litigator, and I joined Rio Tinto in those when they still had a large office in Melbourne. And again, a lot of my work was in relation to regulatory matters, in-house whistleblower and employment investigations. So there was still this dovetail of employment, regulatory investigations. All of those skills were still being brought into, I suppose, the organisation and the experience that I had. And I really enjoyed that role. And sadly, following the dual listing of Rio Tinto, the Melbourne office kind of shut down. Well, didn't shut down, but minimised. And I then went on to join Newcrest Mining in-house. And at the time, there were a number of, I suppose, material litigation and a massive regulatory investigation on foot. So that was the reason that they engaged me. And I spent the next 11 years at Newcrest. 11 years seems to be my my longevity. I'm not quite sure why 11 years, but anyway. And during that period, so I spent sort of the first 5 years involved in a shareholder class action, which I managed. So I was the senior corporate counsel litigation for Newcrest. And really, it was during that time, I suppose 2015, 16, there was the Banking Royal Commission, and hugely increasing regulatory requirements imposed on corporates. And my thoughts were really beginning to shift as the litigation died down to, really we've got to do this better.
Yep.
And moving and thinking towards a more proactive risk management approach, as opposed to always being on the defense side, because most of my career it was helping organizations when they were in trouble, and so this was the beginning, I suppose, of my change, I guess, in thinking towards, what can I do better to help these corporations which I'm working for make sure that they don't end up in the position where they need lawyers helping them defend. And so that was really the beginning of my journey out of litigation. Not completely, but away from pure litigation into preventative, building strategic integrity frameworks.
Yeah.
And I set up it was called Ethics and Compliance at Newcrest, but the whole team took a proposal to the executive committee and the board as to how we might set up an entirely separate function rather than it being a pull from the legal department when things went wrong to looking at what do we need to put in place, and these are global organizations, to make sure that we're thinking about risk, and in particular regulatory and integrity risk, much more strategically. And what are the people and what are the controls, and how do we make this work? And I guess initially it was really about getting the structure in place. What areas of law do we want to focus on? And we focused obviously on the highest risk areas. So in a mining corporation, it was bribery and corruption and conflicts of interest and fraud, privacy, human rights, modern slavery, those sorts of areas where the penalties for corporates and individuals within organizations are at risk.
Yep.
So during that time of putting in place strategic framework and team across the globe, and in jurisdictions like Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, Africa, South America, the US, so quite different cultures. The impact of culture and how that enables you, I suppose, to really embed what you're trying to do from a strategic framework perspective hit home. And I started to focus very much on, we can put all these policies in place, we can have all of these people talking about them, we can do the training, but if you don't have the real drive as an organization to meet those values and to support them, then you're not creating the right place in which we can do this, and it becomes really just a sort of paper exercise.
Yep.
So that's really where, in terms of the trajectory, that's my passion, is understanding cultures of organizations and what they are, and whether or not what you're trying to do is or isn't going to succeed as an organization, depending on your values and your focus. And, unfortunately, businesses need to, this isn't, it isn't a cost to the business. I don't believe. I think these things are absolutely integral to the success and of businesses through their people, and how their people turn up and how their people engage and do the right thing ultimately. So that became an area in the last few years of my time at Newcrest, where I started to look at a lot of data and statistics across the organization, because then in the role of head of ethics and compliance, I was reporting to the board on a quarterly basis about what the risks were, what we're seeing, what we're doing about it, and how they're landing, and are we actually achieving what we're trying to achieve.
Yep.
And the question was always quite narrow. What whistleblower complaints are we getting? What compliance breaches are we seeing? And dealing with them on a spot by or issue by issue just didn't give me the ability to answer the questions the board was asking. How are we? Is this a problem? Oh, I don't know. We're only looking at this narrow piece, and that was part of my cultural enlightenment, I think. In that you do need to understand the business much more broadly across the global landscape, to be able to consider and answer the questions as to, do we have a systemic issue? Do we have a particular leadership issue in an area? Are there particular concerns coming out of a particular department, jurisdiction, country? And delving then into, what's causing this?
Yeah.
What are the root causes, and how do we, what does that mean we need to think about or do to alleviate those matters, those issues.
Yeah. Well, on those frameworks, it's amazing to hear it. And because you were, I think when we first met, I said you were basically the firefighter for so many years.
Yes.
Once it had happened, I said, so now you're trying to do still a firefighter, but preventative. You're sort of doing burn off so you don't actually end up with the bushfire of the whistleblower and it goes public and it's a huge deal. Not just for the financial side, but for the
reputation.
The reputation. Because any company worth its salt, like Richard Branson was probably the embodiment of this, but he said, if I take care of my people, they'll take care of our clients. Simple as that. So, and like that simple philosophy, I think every business owner who wants to build something to, be a global corporation or even just a national big company or IPO starts off with the absolute best of intentions. I truly believe that.
Yes.
And for me, and that's why I really wanted to talk to you about this sort of topic, is where along that journey does the person they wanted to be and the values they wanted embodied in their organization? Because I don't know personally of a business owner. I know there's some psychopathic CEOs out there, but most people, myself included, you want to do right by the people under your care, under your leadership in an organization. And so for me, like and my backstory a bit with dad's whistleblowing and that sort of thing. So I'm always like, I can see it's so easy for any one individual to be corrupted and to go. And for me, the question is, if a whistleblower comes, do you ask about what led to that, or do you ask who the whistleblower was so you can snuff it out? Because in that moment, that's where I see you can basically diverge your paths of, will you embody the values and that you wanted, or will you basically become an authoritarian nightmare to all your people because you're trying to stifle almost dissent in your organization? So my question in saying all that to you is, over all these years of working in these bigger corporations, when does it start? When does the fact that everyone has nice values on their website, but when does that stop being like part of what they're doing? Do you have an answer to that, or do you know roughly when that seed of badness sort of starts in an organization?
Yeah. Look, I think, I'm with you in that I don't think people come from a place of bad. I think people come from a place of good. And I think generationally, leadership has changed and what people want of leaders has changed. I look at my children's careers now and what, they can expect and what's okay and what isn't. And, I think there's a bit too much work, but, from a sort of general principles perspective, we were told to do things. You did it. You did it and you didn't question, and, leadership did tend to be much more authoritarian. I think as, the various generations have evolved, we've given that liberation or opportunity to people to speak up and to question and to add. And along that way, there's been, I think, a change in the way people believe or people want to be led and want to respect people or believe that, that kind of methodology or approach is something you can respect. So I think that, sometimes within organizations, you can come across different leadership styles that great. And if those leaders are under a huge amount of pressure because of KPIs or the need to show, they're running for another role, or they're trying to show, that they're a strong leader because there may have been something that's gone wrong somewhere else and they believe that approach is necessary. I think that then things start to sort of shift a bit. If an organization is in financial strife or is growing, again, you get these sorts of shifts in type of leadership. And I think it's somewhere in there where, these subcultures start to develop and, people start to fear speaking up, lose trust about, what they're being asked to do, where there's a divergence in, what the organization says it wants to do and what it actually does, or what its leaders are showing it does. So you start to see sort of, when you're looking at, a much bigger picture of what's happening in an organization, slight shifts in values, approach, strategy, mentality, or just general feeling within the organization. And it can start really small.
Yeah.
But it inevitably, people talk, you get that sort of negative sort of sentiment spreading. It can spread very, very quickly. And they're the sorts of things I've seen where, you've got a pocket where things are starting to go awry. People are doing things for money, for greed, for power. And that's because they're chasing something that isn't being met.
Yeah.
Quite often. So, the monkey see, monkey do phrase is something I always turn back to. And, the people that lead you, the people that influence you, the people that you respect, you tend to mimic. And so you can quite quickly get out of control in areas where those aren't quite right.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Well, yeah, no, and it's right. And I guess for me, it's almost selfishly, because like me and Courtney want to build a organization built on literally the philosophy of the rising tide lifts all boats.
Yes.
And in doing that, I've realized you have to, well, I'm a big proponent of what you're doing. The small to medium enterprises inevitably become the bigger ones. If they succeed, yes, a lot fail, and that's just part of business, is businesses succeed and fail. But all those companies on the stock exchange who are global now once started off as probably a ma and pa shop, and away they went. And so putting those frameworks in early, I just see as it's sort of safeguarding. Well, it's safeguarding against, for me, it's human nature. Because if anyone's read through history, those terrible wars and the things average people did to other average people, I think it's Nietzsche says the line of good and evil goes down the heart of every man, woman, and child. And I think if you recognize that and then realize, okay, I'm building an organization which can have an impact on society, because that's what most organizations do, whether it's in mining, whether it's in building, no matter what it's in, law, like traditional firms. And if you as the leader don't say, all right, how do I safeguard against that side of me, which I know exists, and put in the wrong circumstances, I'll make the wrong decision, which will deteriorate this. How are you finding getting that message out into people, sort of educating them to go, because it is a tricky message to get right. You're almost becoming I would call it like the taste master, because if someone doesn't want to put these frameworks in their organization, the simplest thing I can say is my brother's a building inspector and real estate agents don't particularly like him. That's because he's a legitimate building inspector who says to a buyer, this thing has some issues and I suggest you take some care. Obviously, the real estate doesn't like that. But as I keep telling him, you are becoming the one that anyone who buys a house says, no, I want that inspected by Dave Loft. The same with what you're doing. What I like, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, but Adari is trying to become almost if you've had an Adari like risk assessment, or tell me how you frame your services, but that organization can sort of put a stamp and say, like, we are actually trying to do the right thing with our culture, our values, and our implementation of those values.
Yes, well, I think that's right. And I think, my background, I mean, I've lived in a number of countries in the world, from, the UK, Germany, and I was born and brought up in Singapore. So I have that sort of perspective from Singapore and Malaysia, and lived in there for many, many years. And then having worked for global organizations and seen, the impact and the differences of the way business works across the world, and through its people coming from different social cultures as opposed to corporate cultures, and how does that meld in? And when you're a big corporate in a particular jurisdiction, trying to put a cookie cutter stamp on everyone is really difficult and probably not a good idea. But having those underlying principles and values is something that needs to be melded to work with what you have. Now, where was I going with that? So I think, the difficulty or the difficult message is getting people to spend time, money, and thought before they're in trouble. And unfortunately, organizations only have a limited amount of funding. And, when things go wrong, my phone will be ringing hot. Unfortunately, that's not really the best solution. And sometimes it can't be avoided. And, no matter of planning frameworks, all the rest of it, things do go wrong, and there are rogues out there and issues happen. But building those foundations and having that conscious realization and stability to grow a business, it takes convincing, takes time to have those discussions, I suppose, at those senior levels with board members or executives to show the difference that a good, strong culture with these frameworks, which are not additions. I mean, my philosophy is that compliance isn't something extra that is added onto a business. It is the culture. You do the right thing because the culture is to do the right thing. Compliance shouldn't be a tick box or paper exercise or burden on an organization. It should just be the way things are done. And there are guidelines there to help you understand. They're not meant to be there as rules. And I think very much when I say compliance, and I sometimes, move more towards calling myself governance, because people think of compliance, and have done. I mean, it has moved a lot, as the policeman.
Yes.
They're coming in. And that's certainly not what I'm trying to espouse or develop in my business. It's much more about, the policeman will come in if you don't get it right. What I'm here to help organizations do is to lead with integrity and have those strong frameworks in place to make sure, as far as possible, people know what the right thing to do is and how to do it. And the people, the leadership, the structures all work to support that.
Yeah. Well, and it makes me think of, and because it's interesting, the messaging of everyone wants accountability. We all know is a good thing. Like the example I've heard, and I've started using myself, is when we were kids, we didn't know brushing our teeth each day it's just one of those annoying chores we have to do, but our parents made it do us. So they were accountable, and they said, every day you're going to brush your teeth and you're going to do this. And I don't think there's a person on the planet who's had a root canal or something at the dentist says that wasn't a bad thing, and I wish I was more regimented with doing it. So accountability, we all know, is a good thing.
Yeah.
And that's where I go and then you show people, but it's also hard. And it's the same as if you want to get fit, people get personal trainers to hold them accountable, to show up to do this.
Yes.
And so showing business owners that this is an investment. This is not a cost. And this is simply you being accountable to the organization, the values that you want to be accountable to, because I truly believe everyone wants to be accountable to their own personal values.
Yes.
What you're helping them build out is a framework that actually embodies that in the day-to-day, because that's what I've realized is accountability needs to be actionable. It can't just be the words, because we all know what we have to do. And in BD, I try to teach lawyers BD. Everyone knows what they have to do, but sometimes it's just the reminder of the daily habit that you need to do this. So what are the frameworks we can put in place?
Yeah.
So I think, what you're building for these types of customers is amazing. Anyone who's honestly wanting to build an organization that has an impact. To have an impact, you need hundreds, if not thousands, of people behind your company. And the company is a vision of this is just something we're going to deliver.
Yes.
I think anyone actually interested in doing that goes, well, we have to invest in that. It's just like registering your company. Well, you have to get all these things in place.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And, the setting up Adari was really an opportunity that I've been thinking about, that came out of, I Newcrest was taken over by Newmont, and my role was made redundant. And that gave me an opportunity to think about how do I actually make a difference. And my focus at the moment, and I've been in business a year, is getting in to speak to people and posting on LinkedIn, providing that sort of thought leadership platform to encourage organizations to speak to people like me and Adari, and others. There's many peers and other competitors out there who are going to help them understand much more deeply what's going on in the business and why things that they're trying to do may not be working.
Yep. And at what stage, before I ask one of my final questions, but for you, what stage of an organization is getting someone like you in? Like, is there a point that's too early, or is it something that can be done like day one, or is it something, when they're maturing, they're sort of 2 to 3 years into their journey, they're past sort of 15 employees? What stage do you think is the perfect stage to have a chat with you?
I'd always say start off with all of your, and organizations doing your strategic plan. You look at what are your values, how do you want to be seen, what's your reputation, what's your brand, all of those things. You're already starting to meld, the messages about what you want to be and how you're going to grow and succeed. It's not something that I think small organizations necessarily need to be investing hugely in, but I do think that it's that mid-level enterprise who are looking to grow. They've got a number of employees, contractors, whatever it might be in the business, and they really need to make sure that they're starting to shape and elevate those initial values and embed them into the organization. So large organizations start looking at, integrity, compliance, regulatory frameworks, how they're going to work. It's a much harder task. And it is very difficult when you've already got in place subcultures, different jurisdictions. So my recommendation is really, as you're beginning to grow, as you're maturing, you're starting to, come under the radar of regulators. So when you're very small, you're quite often not in the eyesight or in the focus. That's not to say you shouldn't be doing the right thing, but it's really as you become a much, a mid-size. I'd say, once you're sort of hitting those sort of 50 people. And in different states or jurisdictions, you really need to start being able to get your hands around how the business is growing and how its people are selling its brand. What's that reputation? Stakeholders are more and more wanting to understand, what sits beneath organizations. Are they interested in, ESG, climate, all these other things that regulations are trying to guide organizations to do the right thing, but stakeholders are demanding that too. So, once you start getting to that sort of size, it is really important to, even if it's at that very preliminary, be clear on what I'm saying that I am as an organization and do what I say I'm going to do. Yep. If you stick to that, whatever that is, then you're going in the right direction. But sometimes as you grow, you start to lose, and if you grow very quickly, you start to lose that ability to keep your hands around that brand and that reputation.
Well, I was going to say, right at that point of around 50, that's when. And I haven't had a company where I've had 50 employees, but I've worked in plenty and seen where they go. That's actually around the moment. And I think it's between 25 and 50 where the CEO or the original founder is no longer hiring every new employee.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling, my gut says at that moment, that's where culture starts getting diluted, or the original intention can be diluted because it's no longer directly founder talking to, hey, do you want to join my vision of where this company can go?
Yes.
So the dilution can happen unless you've got the frameworks in place of here is the policies that must be followed. So if you are hiring new people, they will be
treated like this, and
yes, and follow this procedure.
yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's
that's absolutely right, and it does differ. Some companies with much smaller workforce are already having a big impact, much broader. So once you start to lose, the tentacles start to expand, you need to make sure that you understand that, and that they understand that we're still following the same rule book, I suppose, in terms of values and what it is we want to portray and how it
yep.
is we do it.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'm sure I'll be getting you back on for more stories of it because it's this sort of frameworks are close to my heart. But
Yes.
I do need to ask, because I'm asking all our founding members, you've been in the league for a few weeks now. How are
Yeah.
you finding the Self-Employed Lawyers League so far? And is there any tips, tricks, or would you encourage others to join us?
I would. And I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I've always loved working with you, Jason. And I think your passion and energy is really what brought me to the Self-Employers League. And the people that I'm beginning to meet, and as a founder, it's lovely to see other people join in. I think that the value for me is that ability to share ideas, to share our journeys. We're all in the Employers League, starting out to a large extent and really starting to learn about marketing. Marketing is is the one area that I probably had the least experience coming into this, and the one where I've grown the most, through learnings from yourself and others. And when you're in an organization, in a corporate or government or whatever it might be, you're not going out. You're selling the brand and the organization, but you don't have to do all the steps, I suppose, in thinking about portraying yourself, keeping that message consistent, telling people what you do, being a thought leader. There's so much involved, and being able to share that with other lawyers from different disciplines, with different experiences is really fabulous. That
Yeah.
whole ability to network, it's brought me hugely out of my shell, and is giving me more and more confidence every day to articulate why what I think I do is so important and why I want to do it.
Yeah. Oh, and it is, and I'm happy and delighted to me and Courtney to have you in there, and absolutely want to promote your message because the more companies, for me, as a absolute free market capitalist, almost absolutist, companies have given themselves a really bad name in the last 30 years, and it's because they haven't stuck true to their original values. So having someone like you for me, it's the next generation of companies coming through, those medium enterprises, which will inevitably be on the stock exchanges in the coming years and decades.
Yeah.
Having someone like you putting the frameworks in, it gives me confidence to know at least we'll all be hopefully creating a better economy for everyone, which is fairer from the workers at the coalface to the people in the boardrooms.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I was going to say, I've been connecting with a lot of whistleblowers of large corporates, and it's very difficult, because it's like anyone. If you're put up against the wall as a company, as an organization, and told this is rotten and it's all gone wrong, and your first response is to go, how can it be? I've got to defend this. This is not. So immediately, you get that flip of, is this true? Can this be true? How did I not realize this was happening as an organization, or at the senior levels of the organization? And that flip, needs to be very well entrenched in the culture of the organization and how it's going to be handled.
yeah, that transparency. Well, if people are good operators looking to put these frameworks into their business, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
So I've got a website, which is adariconsulting.com, where you can get in touch with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm always happy to chat with people who are, even if it's just a chat to talk about some ideas or thoughts. I'm very happy to learn about people's ideas or thoughts, even if they're not in a position to spend any time or money. Always happy to have a chat. And, otherwise, by phone, by email, I'm very flexible and, really looking forward to helping organizations become integrity juggernauts.
Yeah, that's a great way to end it. So we'll leave it there, and I'll put all those details in the show notes for people. Thank you very much for being on the show, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Jason. It was a pleasure.